And welcome to another edition of Stay Home with Leica. My name is Tom Smith, and I'm the director of the Leica Academy. This is an ongoing series of discussions with photographers that we are bringing to you, designed to be a break from the daily news cycle and designed as an opportunity for like-minded photographers to get together and hear discussions about the stories behind pictures and different approaches to image making. We hope that it is a welcome respite and a chance for our community of photographers who already know what we do at Leica and the Leica Academy to come together virtually. And for those of you who are finding us for the first time, welcome. I hope that you will find that this is a mix of technical information as well as some creative inspiration along the way. Before we get to introducing our guest for today, give you just a little bit of housekeeping. This is not a one-way conversation. We invite you to be interactive. And there are a couple ways, best ways to do that. One would be in the chat window. If you are not familiar with Zoom, look for an icon like what you see there on the screen for the chat. That's a great place to interact with the audience, interact with each other, let us know where you're listening from. And then if you have questions relevant to the topic, I would encourage you to use the Q&A function within Zoom, and we will do our best to get to those questions. And we've got Antonio, our product specialist and producer for the show, behind the scenes filtering your questions, and he will, we'll check in with him about halfway through and get to some of the questions. So fill in the Q&As as they come to you. And then also just let us know you're listening by using the hashtag #StayHomeWithLeica. Take a picture of your screen, post it. We'll repost you through Leica Camera USA and Leica Akademie USA. And in addition to that, with these ongoing programs, we ask you to use Stay Home with Leica hashtag, but also weekly, we're going to be introducing a different photo challenge. And this week, we have asked you to share a family moment or a daily ritual. Post it, and we will announce one winner on Monday in this week's photo challenge, and that winner will be featured and have a chance to take part in a bespoke Leica Academy workshop. We will change those themes each week, so if you're interested to find out what next week's theme is, you want to tune in at 4 o'clock on Sunday for our next talk, and we'll announce the new theme for next week. Inspiration with Doug Menuez is our topic for today, or our guest for today. And Doug has the kind of resume and life experience that only comes from a life in photography, and specifically a career that starts in photojournalism. He has stood on the North Pole. He's traveled across the Sahara. He's had tea with Stalin's daughter. And he's even held a chunk of Einstein's brain. He's photographed presidents and celebrities. His books include Transcendent Spirit, a chronicle of 20 orphans in Uganda, and their formation of a dance troupe, and their story of coming to notoriety and bringing awareness to the Civil War and the experiences they had dealing with the AIDS epidemic in Africa. In this book, which is one of my favorites, one of the most beautiful stories of the creation of tequila and the culture around tequila and mezcal in Mexico. It's a beautiful book. It also makes me want to have a drink every time. It goes well with a bottle of tequila. And he's probably most well known for Fearless Genius, which chronicles his unprecedented access to Steve Jobs and other great innovators during a pivotal time at the beginning of the creation of Silicon Valley. And he chronicles this time period when many technologies that we are still using today first came about, and they get to the mere idea for those technologies. And the book has been published in 7 countries, 17 different languages. Over 100 million people worldwide have seen the project. And in many ways, the reason I put it up there, fearlessgenius.org, is it's become more than a book. It's a multi-faceted platform to encourage innovation in a new generation of photographers. his archive was recently acquired by Stanford University. And, you know, to be truthful, we could do a separate podcast, a separate webinar like this on all of the topics I've just mentioned.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Tom. It's an honor to be here. I'm delighted. And it's really exciting to say hi to everybody out there. Thank you for joining us today.
But given the fact that so many people are at home right now with family, I thought it would be appropriate, and I really appreciate your honesty in being able to reveal work that you generally don't share with the public in how you have chronicled your own family experience as a father and a husband, and how that has been inspirational to your work in general. Can you take us back a little bit to how you started in photography, and maybe that we'll use that as a segue into the first picture?
Well, it's really a family story because I wanted to be a painter, but my dad gave me a camera when I was 10, a 35mm camera and a roll of tracks. And I was so hooked. I built a darkroom the next year in my bedroom closet. And then I started covering, well, I was shooting family, friends, and actually some of them were paying me to do it. And then I started covering anti-war demonstrations locally, got a job in a studio when I was 15, and was trying to be a street photographer, basically in Manhattan, roaming the streets. When I was 16, I moved into the city and wanted to be Cartier-Bresson and Elliott Erwitt and all the greats. But you know what? I left home when I was 16, so I didn't really shoot my family for many years after that. Interestingly, it wasn't until years later, and I ended up leaving art school and becoming a photojournalist. I got a degree in photojournalism after I quit art school, combining it with a degree with a subset of visual anthropology and fine art. And I ended up working on local community papers in the Bay Area. And then I got an internship to the Washington Post where I was able to, I did well. I got in a lot of trouble, but I did well. And that led to a career freelancing for Time and Newsweek and Fortune and Forbes and USA Today and Life magazine and all the magazines. I did that for about 20 years. And then I transitioned into fashion and a brief fashion career, believe it or not, because they wanted a photojournalist. I worked for Robert Redford for his catalog and Smith and Hawken, and then I started working for Womo Vogue, and that led me into advertising. And I began bringing my documentary approach into ad campaigns, so I could tell stories and get actual authentic moments that I had to do for journalism. I was doing that for advertising. And that allowed me to self-fund my personal long-term documentary projects. That was my plan, was to try to use that commercial money to be able to do my dream, which was long-term projects about stuff I cared about, which are kind of esoteric and not everybody cares about.
We're gonna take the audience through your photography as a photographer, but as an introduction to this next picture, which I gotta warn people, you saw it there just for a brief moment. I think it's rough. It's if you're a father, if you're a mother, if you're a child who had to say goodbye to a dad or a mother when they had to go off to work, it's a tough picture to take right at the beginning, but we're sharing it with you because it's very much a catalyst to why you produced the rest of the work we're going to look at this afternoon.
Well, what happened was this is before I began doing commercial work, which I was a photojournalist flying around, and I had just arrived home from China where I was for 3 weeks. And I was there for one night, and I always keep a go bag, or I kept a go bag at that time. And I had gotten up the next morning and I was leaving for China, and the car was outside, and I was going to go through Germany on my way back, or somewhere, Hong Kong, I can't remember. But just as I was about to go, my wife started crying, and then my son started to cry, and I had this horrible feeling for a second, and then I looked over and I saw on the bureau the Polaroid. And it's like, so what I did instead of hugging them is, I took this picture, and I knew I was doing something terrible at the time, but I was so trained to get the moment. I was just a robot or a monster, one or the other. But it led me into it really caused me to rethink what I was doing. This was my second marriage. I didn't think I would be a good father. I wasn't looking to be a father. And I realized I needed to figure out how to recalibrate my life to be home and to be around and to just think that through. And I used this picture on I did a flying short course tour of the US. I remember Pete Souza was with us, And I think he appreciated this picture, but it went over pretty badly with the young photojournalists who wanted to just hear war stories. And I ended up kind of talking about how, what if you were actually, you know, we're supposed to be empathetic, we get access, we get trust with our subjects, and, you know, to tell their stories and bring light to injustice. And I thought, well, why are we such failures as family members? I mean, when I got to the Post, 20 photographers were divorced, one was separated out of 21 people. And a lot of the photojournalists I grew up with were terrible, terrible fathers and mothers, perhaps. But I want to say this, it's just, the idea was, what if you went through the intensity of a relationship and you really spent time and learned to be a good parent, a good husband? Wouldn't that make you a better photojournalist and more empathetic to the people you're covering? That was my idea. It didn't really resonate with my audience.
Well, so Doug, talk about how, you know, these images we'll look at right now are in chronological order, but there was, you know, a few years obviously between the Polaroid and your son turned 6, and you go to make this project.
Oh, hello. This is my wife, Teresa.
Hello. Thank you, but good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Well, I don't know if I could talk about this in front of you, but okay. Thanks, no pressure. Well, what happened was a few years later, so anyway, I started that process of thinking about my role and what I was doing and how I could be better at being a parent and father and husband. And when Paolo turned about 8, I actually realized I hadn't really photographed him since that day that I took that picture. I mean, I had a few baby pictures, but it was Teresa that was shooting all the pictures of the family. I hadn't done any at all. It was like the shoemaker's son. And I had this realization, and I thought, I better get busy. So I took Paolo and we spent a few days, and I just documented kind of a day in his life. And it was so much fun. And I made this little book, and I published this, or self-published this little book. We bound it with rivets. And I gave it to my wife and Teresa, who you just met. And I was probably out of trouble for at least 2 years. And then, you know, I think all artists really do exploit their family. They shoot their family, they photograph their family, or they paint their family. And, you know, we tell our students, you know, work in your own backyard. You don't have to go around the world when you're starting out. You have this intimate relationship with these people that you could document. And for me, it was a way to get to know my son a little bit better and spend time. And then, of course, we found this poem before I finished the book. He had Asperger's. He had been diagnosed. He was diagnosed with Asperger's a few years after this. We didn't know, and he was he wasn't very talkative, and he was very shy, and he had a lot of learning disabilities. Anyway, you wouldn't know this if you met him now. He's like this genius, charming young man, but at the time he was having a lot of problems, and the teachers were really cruel at his school. They were he just had a horrible childhood with his learning disabilities. And, you know, we did the best we could, but we had this revelation. This bag of papers got handed to my wife at the end of the year. It was a big mess, a bag of all these like papers stuffed into a bag. And she went through each one and she found this poem. And it was a shock to us because we realized just how sensitive and really brilliant this kid was. This is a poem he wrote at 8 years old. And I don't know if you can see it, but it says, "Ode to my mother. She works so hard, like an axe hacking on a thick tree. For 40 years, she only made it an inch. She gives up. She cares about my father like a delicate glass rose balancing on her nose. She's seen pain. She hates war like a bottomless pit. Light shines wherever she goes."
Wow. Wow.
Well, that's cool. We're like, oh, this kid could be a writer. Yay.
So what did you end up doing with this book after it was made? I mean, was it shared beyond your family, or was it something? Yeah.
I was starting to move into commercial work, and I wanted to position myself as an artist that would be thrilled to accept your commission to document your story about your product, your brand. I wanted to integrate art and commerce. I didn't want to be, oh, I'm going to do this for the money. I wanted to be happy doing whatever I shot. So I had to make the two things merge. I had to merge art and commerce. And I feel like, you know, so what did I do? I printed this up. I had it printed and I sent it out to art directors and commercial clients around the world. And it generated like $1 million of revenue that we tracked over the next couple of years. So yes, I totally took advantage of that. But it also paid for his private school.
You know, I think, and this is a picture of the final version or the inside of the book. I think what you say is really poignant, Doug, because so often, especially in the world of photojournalism, there's this idea or tradition of going to photograph the other and having to move to another community or go someplace outside of your own backyard. And not that you haven't done international work. I mean, clearly we looked at that at the beginning, but this commitment to photograph not just the events, the birthdays, the weddings, and the significant events that most people do. I mean, the reality is more people are making photographs now than ever before. We all have access to some kind of device to record. But the next several pictures we'll look at, it's striking to me that these are not the big events. They are the quiet moments that you've chosen. You did the edit here that we're going to look at, and they only become significant in the fact that you chose to record them.
This was supposed to be a gift, a family portrait for my sister and her new baby, and George and Max and Julia. But this was my favorite picture, so of course that's in my portfolio. You're looking at a page from my current portfolio there. You know, what you said is true. It's the quiet moments, because that's what I do anyway. That's what I'm fascinated by, these little tiny moments of interaction. This is a little bit less than quiet, but you know, it's the off thing that you might not always notice. That's what's fascinating to me. But something you said is that it's funny because for 20 years I missed every single wedding, every birthday, when I was shooting on Christmas, whatever. It was only when I was able to build a studio in Sausalito and get commercial clients that I was able to be there for those events. But yeah.
Share with that as we go through these pictures. What was there a moment, you know, from having worked for the Washington Post, work as a freelancer, and then you working in Uganda, to establishing a over $1 million studio in Sausalito? Take us through that. What changed in your approach, and how did that impact your relationship with your family?
Oh, it's complicated because, you know, I felt thrilled to be able to support my family and build that studio, and I loved the work. I actually love doing advertising work. It's so much fun to be like a director and have a crew. And the reason I love it is because I'm usually getting hired to shoot this kind of pictures anyway. What I'm shooting are little moments of interaction, of emotion, that reveal something of the human experience, our shared human experience. We all share these experiences, and that's what photography can do. And I think it's exciting for me, by the way. I want to segue to, you said everybody's a photographer. Well, I find that thrilling to look at Instagram and see all these pictures from people who just started shooting with their iPhone or whatever. And it's like 1 billion smartphones came online last year and unleashed all this human creativity, which is one of the best things technology can do. But getting back to your question, I was not really prepared for the success that we had. It grew very quickly. It was a multi-million-dollar studio. We had 15 employees. And my plan, as I said, was to integrate the art and the commerce, and try to be true to myself. But I didn't know how to say no. I had to learn that lesson, very hard lesson, the most powerful word in the English language. And I did burn out, and that changed again. I went through another kind of crisis, existential crisis of who I was and how I was relating to my family. And, you know, I think when you are a photojournalist, you learn to shut down your feelings you don't feel, you can't feel. So it's very hard to be present in a relationship and be equal in a relationship. So when I burned out, we started this process of moving back to New York from California and shutting everything down there, partly because our son wanted to go to school in New York. So we did. We moved to Woodstock. We sold everything in California. And I spent a year walking around this land we bought upstate. And I got my brain back and started to rethink my priorities. And that's when I was able to really start to get my books done. The Tequila book, thank you for your kind words, and the book about the AIDS orphans in Uganda, which is a great story. It's a good news story about the power of arts and education in Africa. But these pictures that you're showing are just little moments over the years of different family members. So if you look at it like, how did I integrate family photography into my work? I really didn't do much for many, many years until I shot Paolo. Oh, this is Paolo and Devin, his wife. They just got married a year ago in Japan, and now this is in Sweden last summer, doing a crazy dance. They're both really good dancers. I hate them because I can't dance. But
as we're going through these, let me filter a couple questions up to you. Someone's asking, you mentioned Cartier-Bresson earlier, and do you wait for a decisive moment with these family pictures?
Yeah, I try. I do try, yes. I mean, that's my training is watching and waiting and watching and waiting. But I'm also interested in process, so I tend to shoot more than most people probably, and I'll shoot a lot of little moments that may not be the great big deal moment. Also, I like unresolved mystery. I really am attracted to things that I couldn't do in photojournalism back in the day. Now pictures are much more sophisticated. The audience is more sophisticated. This is our son a few years ago. But I think that the decisive moment is whatever you think it is, and yeah, people may or may not react to that. So it may not be successful, but I'm interested in the in-between moments as much as I am in the decisive moments, I guess.
So here's a great timely question. Do you find photographing family distance you from them? This viewer says, I found that I put myself in a separate place to photograph emotional moments. Do you find it separates you, or is it a means to connect?
Well, you have to be sensitive. I think in my case, my family probably tolerates me more than most because they're also artists, and they understand that I am compelled to take pictures. One of the ways I learn about myself and who I am and my place in the world is through taking pictures. And I'm constantly interested in our family relationships. This is my mother before she died last year. It can be kind of cold. You do have to separate yourself because you can't shoot effectively if you're feeling emotions. So you're taking yourself and you're putting yourself into this sort of Zen meditative state. You're not thinking, you're just watching and waiting. Later, when you look at the pictures or you share the pictures, there's emotion. I'm really glad I got to shoot these pictures of my mother. But like I was going to say earlier, I didn't really shoot my family. I left home at 16. And then with Teresa and Paolo, I started to shoot them a little bit. But when we moved back to New York, we got to see my mom and my dad. My dad and his wife, Jean, live upstate, not too far from here. And I can't even talk about
this picture makes you it stops you in your sense. I know.
But anyway, at family gatherings, I'll take pictures like this at my dad's house. There's a lot of chance now, and so I always bring a camera when there's a family gathering. Either here at our house or at my dad's or somewhere. And my sister will fly in from California. My other sister's in Vermont. My brother's in Manhattan, and they all have kids. And I'm probably not a good family photographer in that I'm not covering it completely. This was just last week with my sister Jane and her daughter Izzy, who's nearby, goes to Bard College. It's funny, over the years, I didn't shoot that many family pictures, but I got a few. So.
In terms of your approach with documenting your family, and I'd like to maybe compare this to your corporate assignments, but the question is, are you very much in the mold of, you do the thinking ahead of time and afterwards, and when you're in the act of shooting, when you're active working, you're not overly thinking the process, it's very instinctual?
Yeah, I think everything I do is instinctual. When I'm doing commercial work, I will have a storyboard or a layout, and I'll conceptualize and I'll think about what I want to do. But that is a way for me as a launching pad into improvisation and trying to create something even deeper or a variation of what that approved layout was. This is at my sister's house in LA and my brother Ross after our mom passed away. And I haven't shot too many pictures of family in really sensitive moments, to be honest, but they let me, so I shoot it. And also, one thing about this for me, I think it's true of everybody who takes pictures. And, you know, I'll tell you something. I used to hate it when I would go on a shoot and I'd have to see the family albums. People would take out the family albums as a way to show you who they are. And I used to hate family albums. It was probably because of the way I grew up or the problems I had in my own childhood or whatever the psychological reason is. This is my sister 25 years ago in LA with her amazing husband, Armando. I think that I had like all this conflicts growing up and with family. And so now I look at these pictures and I'm really glad that I shot them. And I think that's the beauty of family albums for everybody, is that you're really glad you have this record of the family history. And family albums around the world are such an important insight into the history of culture of not only that family, but the place they live and all the things they've experienced. So, and my wife has tons of family albums. She's the keeper of the family history, much more than me. I'm just getting little moments. But I am shooting instinctively. I have the camera with me usually everywhere I go, all the time. You know, newspaper training. You know, they used to tell us when I worked on community papers, you should always have your camera. You never know when a plane's going to crash. That was actually what they would say. So, but for me, it's just that when I don't have my camera, I see something amazing. My best shots are right here. The best shots are all memories because I didn't get them. But the same way I shoot my street photography or my assignment work, I always have the camera. And if I'm on a set that's a commercial shoot, I'll have the camera usually on my shoulder and I'll be taking pictures of the talent when they don't think I'm shooting. I'll be stealing.
To that question, and you showed the SL there, someone asks if he's wondering if the Leica SL is too big for family photography, and do you prefer to use an M or a Q? He's wondering if his camera setup is too big, if it is problematic.
Well, I just love the quality. I love this camera because of the zoom lenses. I'll be honest with you. I have an M9, and I have a CL, which I love. And I use the CL a lot with the family, but I really don't think it's too big. It feels fine for me. It's still half the size of the Nikon D5 that I had before I switched to Leica. So I don't think it's not too big for me, but really I love the zooms that come with the SL system. And the SL2 now is just a stunning leap forward. But the zooms have the quality of primes at every focal length. They're just unusual glass. And I really love the look of those. So the extra weight doesn't bother me. But I also have to do push-ups and lift weights anyway every day. You gotta stay in shape to shoot. This is my niece, Janaina. And now she lives in Italy. This is when we used to live on West 23rd. That's our building. And that's my sister-in-law, Magia. She's an amazing, famous singer in Sweden. She's Brazilian and has sung all over the world, has a great voice. I think, you know, you can find her music on SoundCloud or CD Baby.
Doug, we're going to see this as we go along, but maybe now's a good time to mention it. You honor the people that you photograph, and you can see that they know that they're being honored. There's a humanity in your pictures that I don't often see. And I credit that with your ability to, the warmth that you bring to a set or to just life. But is there one or two tricks you can give to people who are photographing their own family, and I shouldn't say tricks, but approaches that you can give to people photographing their family as well as approaching strangers? Something you found that works all the time for you?
Well, thank you for that. I think it's the same if I go to Brazil or I go to Africa or go to New York City and I have an assignment to shoot a family or somebody I don't know. I need to spend time before I shoot with them. I need to talk to them. I need to ask them questions. I need to drink a shot of whiskey with them or tequila or whatever. You have to be able to listen and try to, you never know what you're going to hear. And with your family, we think we know our family. We think we know them. You think you know them. You're sick of them. You want to kill them at Thanksgiving. Those people are not who you think they are. You have to really, this is a great thing about using photography to shoot your family. It's another way to get to know each other on a different level. Everybody has an inner life. And yes, I respect my subjects. I know what I don't know. I like to have the attitude of I know nothing. I like to be as humble and have Zen beginner's mind as I can. But the trick and tips that I would say is basically the same as I use for any human being. You should go into shooting your family as if they are strangers and show them the respect you would show somebody you don't know. You know, now like with street photography, sometimes I'm stealing moments, but then usually I'll walk up to them and I'll ask them for their email and say, hey, I just got this, and I'll show them. Because I feel like when you take a picture, you definitely are stealing their soul. You definitely are a part of their soul. But so you have to give something up to get something. You have to be prepared to give. And that could just be respect, or it could be your life, but you have to be willing to give and be open to whatever. I mean, it might start a conversation you didn't expect with family members. There is this element of exploitation, though, that I mentioned at the beginning, that artists have used their families as raw material for centuries, forever. You know, every painter ever lived, because it's such a fraught, deep, intense situation, and maybe dysfunctional. And maybe photography is a way. I mean, I just really was inspired a lot by Sally Mann and some of these most amazing photographers. Harry Callahan shooting his wife Eleanor, and just Elliot Erwitt's beautiful family pictures. I mean, some of my favorite photographers all have these incredible family pictures. And I think that's going to be enduring as much as any of their work. But especially Sally Mann, the way she interacted with her kids as she was raising her kids. I think it's a way to talk to each other that's nonverbal and shows love and shows interest. It's a way to show interest in your family, especially if you're shooting your kids. Now, some kids get really sick of it because everybody's taking pictures, so many pictures all the time. So I would think about a story. I would think about what is the story you want to tell about this child or this kid or this aunt or uncle. What is the story? A lot of photojournalists have documented some really painful stories that are incredibly heroic of family members going through illness or dying or something like that. But it doesn't have to be that dramatic. It can just be the first day of school. You know, you have to think about what is the story. This is my sister-in-law, Betulia. She showed up from Brazil in in the early 70s when I was 15. We became immediate friends. She joined our gang in the art department, smoking pot and hiding out. And I did not know that 3 years later I was going to meet her sister, Teresa, who also came from Brazil. The oldest sister, Magda, got them out. It was a dictatorship at the time. It was a scary time in Brazil. But I took this in my parents' living room when I was 15, and I still love it. I still love this picture.
Wow. Wow.
And I love Betulia.
It's pointed to me, the observation you make that you are so happy that you have these pictures now. And
I didn't until we were talking just now. I didn't realize it.
Right. No, we put this in here because you posted this on Instagram, and I think it really points to the idea that our relationship to photographs changes as time goes on. You know, I often say the difference between a historically significant photograph and a snapshot is just time. And you know,
well,
I worry not only in my own work but for photographers in general that we will have lost a great deal of photography in terms of digital photography if by not properly having it backed up. And so in your process, shows and books, sharing online, all of these things are integrated. And we're going to highlight some books in your most recent work there in Kingston, New York, and your recent exhibit in the Leica store in Boston and the Leica store in DC of Americana.
Mm-hmm.
But my question to you in terms of this idea of relationship changing and appreciating photographs differently, the question I want to point to you before, Antonio, we entertain some audience questions, is how has your relationship to photography changed since you started to now? How do you view your role as a photographer, or your role? Do you have the same enthusiasm? Has it waned over the years? What is your feeling about photography now?
It's like heroin. It hasn't changed at all. I'm addicted. I felt the minute I picked up a camera, I was compelled to record the world around me. And I haven't changed a bit. It hasn't changed. It hasn't stopped. there's been times where I've been burned out, but I still had a camera. I don't know. I can't really see any. That's my dad and my stepmother, Jean. One of the great things that's happened about living nearby is we get to go have dinner at this diner down near Poughkeepsie all the time, which we love. But how has my relationship with photography changed? I think I've become better. I think I have, as I've learned more about myself, my brain has changed also, and in terms of how I see. But honestly, I think the through line that if you look through all my work is still there. It's about trying to connect with the other, kind of connect with that other person and bring something out of them that we can all relate to, or that we identify with, or that teaches us who we're not. You know, I wanna bring that out. And you mentioned the integrated part. That's interesting because I've been trying to do these cross-media platforms where you have a film and you have a book, you have an exhibit, I do talks, but it really hasn't been as clear to me what that meant until I started working with this amazing agent, Heather Elder, who's my agent, and she does these integrated campaigns, and it really brings it to another level where you learn to think and see about each element in a different way, and it makes the whole experience richer. And I think all photographers have to be thinking about multimedia. I mean, it's been going on for a long time, but now it's really here. We really have to be thinking that way. And I'm doing a lot more film, obviously. This is a picture I took of my grandmother, Roxy, in Florida shortly before her death. I hadn't seen her probably since I was 5 or 6 or 7 or something, or 8. And this was on my way to the Washington Post. I drove across country to take up the internship. So this would have been 1981. And the picture, if you go back one picture, that's my father. And that's her mother. So, hey, you know, I feel really glad that I made some of the pictures I made. I missed a lot, but now that I'm getting older, I actually care about these pictures. I really think they're important. And I think a lot of photojournalists and photographers deny themselves because they're so committed to telling stories. They're so committed to doing what they do that they forget about themselves. And that can also lead to burnout. And you have to take care of that and feed the well. And that's something you can do during this downtime that we have, this enforced downtime, is you can think how to recharge yourself creatively by going back to your work, what I've been doing. And this is great that you invited me on here because it forced me to go back and edit family pictures. And it was a great experience for me. I really felt good about this. But that's one of the things that I do. I actually shoot so much that I never get to really go back and visit what pictures I love. So maybe that's one of the ways my experience with photography, or my approach to photography, is changing, that I'm trying to slow down and I'm trying to really think more about what I'm doing and about the work. And time to edit has been really good during this period. I also run, I also meditate, I also drink really good red wine, and I'm working on a lot of design projects for new books and stuff. So
I'm going to pull up, we'll go to the voice in the sky, Antonio, and if you can propose, there are a couple questions that you have that might be appropriate.
Yeah, Doug, I think I speak for everyone to say that your work is fantastic and this is great. We got some really great questions from people, and I'm going to do my best to get to as many as possible. And right here, I'm going to actually combine a couple of them, both really good questions. One is, how is the current crisis influencing and challenging your creative process? And then how do you keep your inspiration going?
Oh, those are really good questions. You know, I have to say this is a time of waiting, and I'm not any less stressed than anyone out there. I mean, all our shoots were canceled before this thing hit. We naively thought we were going to go out and shoot for Apple just the day that it all shut down. I think that everything that I listed before, it's really important to have a routine. So I get up, I work out, I try to meditate, which I also have ADD like my son, so it's very, very hard, but it really has helped me. I try to find music that calms me down, and I spend time looking at the work. It's like what I was saying, I'm trying to look at the work, and I never have time to really look at the work. And I think that's really important to learn and grow. And you have to challenge yourself creatively to get inspired. You have to sit and think, what's making you unhappy? what's making you unhappy, and then really address that. It's almost like you have to go through phototherapy somehow, because a lot of photographers get into a rut and they feel burned out and they get into this place where they're really depressed, but it's really because they're shooting stuff they hate, and they're forced to do that either because they're making a living at doing just that thing and they have to repeat it, or if they're afraid to push themselves to try new things, which is just human. That's just human. So I really think if you want to be inspired, try something that pushes you out of your comfort zone. Walking up to a stranger in the street if you've never done that, and engaging and trying to get their portrait, or shooting your family. There's a lot of great movies. Think of Fellini. Family is fraught with peril. You have to be very careful. But I think to get yourself inspired, you have to push yourself to shoot something you haven't done. And sometimes you'll fail at that. We're all going to fail, and failure is inevitable. But if you don't try, you'll never hit it out of the park. So I think you have to figure out what makes you uncomfortable and then push yourself to go after that.
Antonio, maybe a couple more?
Yeah, we got a couple great ones. This is probably one of my favorite questions actually asked today, because it kind of makes me chuckle. So you are photographing a family of artists. How do you overcome dealing with a family of engineers or business people or accountants? Or I'll add to it, a family of people who think when someone points a camera, you're supposed to just smile and say cheese.
You got to be fast. That is the nightmare. I go around when I'm documenting out in the world, and these kids are so trained now to pose. It's astonishing to me. It's shocking. Plus, everybody in Manhattan on the street probably has an agent already. So yeah, I think to the last one, that's about being quick and trying to wait and watch for moments they're not aware that you're there. And you know what? When they smile and pose when I'm holding the camera, shoot that and then pretend to stop. And they go, they look up, bang, now you got it. Because they look away when you can lose that thing. But it's also good if there are kids to go in and shoot them when they're waking up. Maybe wait for not a school day, but on a Saturday or Sunday, shoot them waking up. It's fantastic. You get amazing stuff. What was the other part of the question? It was, a family of accountants. Oh, a family of engineers. I love that because I spent 15 years in Silicon Valley documenting engineers. Engineers are my people. I love engineers. They are quirky, brilliant, irritating, hilarious, crazy, dogged, heroic. They are saving us. I just love engineers because they're all about process. They would never recommend that you try a drug that hasn't been tested by the FDA. They're very, I can't be an engineer because my brain is all over the place, but I really appreciate them. So I think if you have a family of engineers or accountants or people that work with their brains on process type stuff, I think your job is the same as with the child. It's to sneak up on them and carefully wait until they're not aware and then just shoot quiet moments. It doesn't have to be a big deal. They could just be staring at their computer screen. You have to watch and wait. When I was shooting in Silicon Valley, I would spend 2 or 3 hours just roaming the hallways of Steve Jobs' company Next. And I would just wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. And all of a sudden, there would be evidence of human behavior. They're human after all. They would emote. And engineering emoting is like my favorite picture of all time because it's so rare. So you got a good challenge ahead of you.
Doug, I want to use that. I've heard you say, we started at the beginning with the project on your son. And I've heard you say in other interviews, when people ask for advice, you say you need to marry someone as good as Teresa in terms of being a successful photographer. And since that's not available necessarily for everyone, what I would ask you is set up this project and maybe the idea of finding a muse, because everyone, male, female, can find a muse. And how did you do that?
Well, Teresa's my business partner. When we first got together, and that was my second marriage and her third marriage, by the way. But when we got together, she was my photo assistant. She was the caterer. She was the stylist. She did wardrobe. She did hair and makeup and casting. We didn't know you could hire people for that at first. But at any rate, she's really my muse because we're so in love. We're like soulmates. It's now 32 years. And I'm deeply in love with my wife and really grateful to her for how she puts up with me. And this book you're showing now happened because one morning, it was her 48th birthday, I think, and we woke up. It was a beautiful sunny day in Mill Valley. And I was really happy it was going to be a great day. And she looked over at me and she said, "Why am I not in your portfolio anymore? Am I too old?" There is no correct answer. There are no words that can come out of your mouth to answer that. And luckily, I knew that. But I looked over, and right by my bed was my camera. So I got out of bed, I turned around, and I started shooting her, and she happened to be nude. But we then spent a few days together and tried different things. This is at our studio, and it was really fun. And I made some pictures that I'm really proud of, and I made this book with this incredible designer named Clive Booth, who's an amazing photographer in England now and filmmaker. But you know, Teresa and I've had incredible experiences, incredible life together, just crazy stuff I won't get into now. But in this book, I started to write a series of memoirs that our friend Bill Smith edited for me. Because I'm not a writer, but I really want to be a writer. It's just too hard. It's too hard. But I wrote these little memoirs of things that had happened. This is about Teresa's life. She's had a lot of tragedy and she's overcome a lot. Her family's amazing. I hope someday that'll be my first feature film, is her family story and our story. But anyway, this book was my way of telling her that I loved her. And of course, then we printed 30,000 copies and sent them out around the world. And she was a little embarrassed with the nudes, but she was really happy with it. And I think she likes it. I think she likes it. You could ask her, but she wouldn't. I'm glad she's not here right now.
You know, again, Doug, I appreciate you sharing this work that you don't normally share in a wider audience, and it's our privilege to get to hear the stories behind them. But I'm going to push you a little bit, because you have taught a number of workshops for the Leica Academy, and normally under the title of Artist Journey, Emerging Art and Commerce. And one of the key pieces of advice that you give people is to show the work that they never show. That they got, you know, to show the work that they hold back. And you have found a great deal of success out of that, taking that approach. So again, I thank you for this, but I also sense a little shyness in you in sharing this. Do you actually, is that?
I think I'm more mature now, but when we printed this and I shot it, I wasn't very mature. I just felt instinctively this was personal, and therefore it was valid work and it was important work. And if you wanted to hire me, you needed to know this work. So I sent it out, but actually I've kind of kept it quiet for the last, 15 years or 20 years since we made this piece. This was 2004.
Sure. Well, using that as a segue, you are constantly working, and I use that as a segue into this next project, which you are now in Kingston, New York. And can you give us what was the impetus for starting this?
Well, we moved to this. We bought this loft here in 2007, and this was sort of a funky old rundown factory town, New England factory town that's just having this tremendous resurgence. And we decided we wanted to streamline and downsize. We had this house across the river with a studio and a lot of overhead. And, you know, we're trying to put our money into our documentary project. So we thought, let's move back to the loft. Kingston is coming up. Well, as soon as we got here, we saw the whole town had changed so much. So many people are moving up from the city and from all over the world. There's so many interesting artists, a lot of actual Hollywood people. They're building a film studio here. It's just Kingston's become very, very interesting, new restaurants and bars. And I started walking around, and the first person I met was this amazing young talented singer named Nikki the Great. You can find her on Instagram. And she was shooting a music video. We're going to direct a music video with her as soon as this COVID is done. That's one of my next projects. But I found that I started to meet all these interesting people in the town, and it just gave me this chance to sort of meet and become part of the community by interviewing and photographing the people that I would meet. So we printed this book up. This is volume 1. And I just think, you know, like I said earlier, we tell our students shoot in your own backyard. And I was a little bit conflicted about moving here. I wasn't sure it was going to work out because it's such an interesting, or such a multi-layered place. And we loved when we lived in Manhattan. And so we didn't know. But anyway, it's been really great. And the people are what make it great. It's just an incredible, really diverse community. And I really, really loved the way that people are letting me actually shoot them. It's become a project that I'm going to continue. This is volume 1. And I don't know if you can see these, but anyway, this is volume 1. And I've already shot another 7 or 8 people. And you can actually buy this. You can get.
I think we may have that. Let's see. We'll go. Here we go. We can let people know where they can buy it.
Well, if you want a physical book, you can DM me on Instagram or you can email me directly. But if you want to buy the digital version, it's on issue.com, along with the Americana catalog from our show that's still up right now in DC at the Leica store in DC. A shout out to those guys in Boston. Thank you both for having the show. And I really love this catalog. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, Doug, I'm going to backtrack a second, and you mentioned in our conversation today this idea of beginner's mind, and in spite of all of the life experience and amazing stories, you know, if anyone gets to have dinner or attend a workshop with Doug, I would highly encourage it. In fact, we're going to be looking at a way to bring the artist journey as an online workshop in the not too distant future.
I hope
but
so.
One of the things that is consistent in your approach is a sense of gratefulness for where you've ended up and for your interactions with all kinds of people in your daily life. And it seems I couldn't think of anyone more appropriate to direct this video here. Can you share a bit of the backstory, and we can encourage people to look at it after the talk?
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because this just dropped yesterday. There's this amazing organization called gratefulness.org with some amazing people. And another incredible person named Per Yurishima was a client from Apple. We were shooting for her over the last few years. And she got me involved because they liked my approach to do a couple of short films about Brother David Steindl-Rast, who is a internationally known interfaith teacher, speaker. 7 million people watched his TED Talk. He's a best-selling author. He's 93 years old. And they asked me to have him create a film that was like a meditation with him reading from his book of blessings. He has a best-selling book called 99 Blessings. And so he read, I think, 5 or 6 blessings. And then we created illustrative themes that were metaphors for what he was talking about. I didn't know if that was going to go over very well. But honestly, working with him and getting to know him and the people at gratefulness.org, it really did change me and change my life because I think I was open to it. You know, I've been a cynical, hardcore New Yorker most of my life, but I think that I had to just open up and be vulnerable and be open as I am when I'm taking pictures. But I think really thinking about all of the blessings we have, you know, at this particular time, it was so great to work on this film, but have it come out yesterday was really great. I started my day looking at it because, you know, we're stressed out. You know, we're really working to figure out the next steps. Are we going to get out of this? We want to figure out how to get jobs or create new revenue streams or get SBA loans. You know, everybody I know is hustling right now to figure this out, survival. And this film is just a little nice break from all of that Corona stress. And so I'm just so grateful and in love with these guys at gratefulness.org and to Per for getting me involved. And we have a second film, I hope, coming later this year, which is an interview with Brother David. Brother David is one of the most interesting people. He's a Benedictine monk. He's 93 years old. And he got permission from the Pope in the 1950s to study Zen Buddhism with the 2 Japanese Zen masters that brought it to the US. So his thinking is really creative and really interesting. And he brings all these different ideas together. And he's really creative and unusual. Like one of the blessings is, bless us for imprecision, which I just love. He has a great sense of humor. Anyway, that's probably too much more than you needed to know, but you can see that on my Instagram feed or go to gratefulness.org.
No, I'm going to put you on the spot here with this, Doug. This has been wonderful, and I want to thank you right now. And before I put you on the spot, which is to say this: if you leave photographers with one question they should ask themselves, one question, what's the most important question a photographer can ask themselves?
I think the most important question that you could ask yourself is related to everything we've been talking about. What is it that gets you up, that makes you so excited? I don't know if you remember that feeling when you pulled your first print out of the fixer or out of the Epson printer. Epson, yay. By the way, I'll tell you something about that on the side, but the best question is, what makes you you? Who are you? What do you see that no one else sees? What do you feel that no one else feels that you can show us or bring to us? And that is about the same thing as what is exciting, what makes you so excited, what are you passionate about photographing? If you're not feeling that, oh yeah, feeling, you're not shooting the right things. You need to dig deep, and this is okay. This is a process over years sometimes. Some people don't know what it is that they really love right away. You got to try different things if you don't know. And sometimes you know, but you're in denial and you're not letting yourself do it.
Well, Doug, I'm going to give, it's a great question. And as people are thinking about that, I would give them one actionable item, which is if you do nothing else today, go and follow Doug's Instagram and take a look at the video that he has on his Instagram TV. It will really give you a pause, give you a beat to contemplate where we all are in this time. And I think it's a very timely video. Doug, thank you very much. Everyone who's been listening and stayed with us the whole time, thank you. We are not done. We have more to come. Leica Akademie will be continuing to produce these events through at least the first week of May. Our next program will be this Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern with a home renewal. In fact, all of our topics next week, we'll do 3, Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Every one of those topics will deal with creativity in place. How can you be creative in place at home? And we'll feature photographers who are doing that or photographers who have ideas on how you can do that. And again, it'll start off this Sunday at 4 o'clock with Jennifer McClure and Juan Cristobal Cobo. Also on Saturday, check your local Leica stores. They will be featuring live Instagrams, all of those happening throughout the afternoon on Sunday. And as we continue on with this Stay Home at Leica campaign, this is the link that you can check out to find out all the latest news and links to register for these programs. Doug, thank you once again for your time and your stories. We'll want to have you back because I know we've just graced the surface of what's possible.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Lots of love. Stay safe.